So today we're going to talk about threat and risk assessments and the security assessment and authorization process, how TRAs and SNAs work together, and why you should or should not be doing a TRA. What I want to talk about is the trends in risk management. So we have seen an increase in the adoption of security assessment and authorization programs. So I've mentioned three of them here. The very first one is not a true SANA program, but it is something that was created by the International Organization for Standardization, or ISO. And ISO 27001 is sort of the grandfather of all these SANA programs. So it bared mentioning here. The next one down is the American standard for the US government. So this is produced by the National Institute of Standards and Technology. So NIST 853A lays out their SANA process. And then in Canada, we took that and created a Canadian version. CSE put it out and called it ITSG 33. And that's the one that you will most commonly see here in Canada. And as I said, we see that as we get more SANA, the number of TRAs is going down, but the rate that they've decreased by is not as steep as it should be. And I'm not saying that the rate isn't as steep as we thought it was going to be. I'm saying it's not as steep as it should be. That is, people are still doing TRAs when they're not warranted for their system or for their business process. So why do people do them? Well, there's good reasons and bad reasons to do TRAs, and I'm going to start with the bad reasons. And the first one is the absolute worst reason to be doing a TRA, and this is compliance. And when I say that, what it is this is pure compliance driven. So you're doing a TRA because you need a check in the box, because there's a policy or a regulator saying you must have a TRA, and then you don't do anything with it. None of the recommendations are actioned. It's put on a shelf to collect dust. So you haven't gotten any enhancement to your risk management, and you've spent a bunch of resources, time, and money to produce this document. So if you are in this boat, my first thing I would recommend is please stop doing the TRAs for this reason. So the second bad reason, which is the little guy looks like he's falling off, he's actually trying to get over to the good because he's not always bad, is that your organization doesn't have an SNA program. And this is quite common, particularly in smaller organizations, because there is overhead involved in establishing SANA and then maintaining it throughout its life cycle. So if your organization doesn't have an SANA program, people default back to doing TRAs. So the good reasons, and some of these get a little complicated, and I will be revisiting part of this, is there are limitations in the SANA program. Even the standards that lay them out, like ITSG 33, tell you that they have limitations on what they can and can't address. The other good reason to do a TRA is to address a specific risk scenario. And this happens most often in the design stages. If you're looking at different options and you're saying, well, what happens if we build this, or what happens if we do it that way? You can do a small focused TRA to look at the different options and assess the risk in going one direction or the other. This here is very quickly comparing the two processes. And what you'll notice is I highlighted in green some components of the TRA and components of the SANA. And these are the parts of those processes where they are stronger than the other. So what we want to do is we want to enhance the SANA process with pieces from the TRA process. And what we're trying to accomplish here is two things. We want to get more out of your SANA process without having to conduct a TRA. Or if you do have to do a TRA at the same time, most likely because you have those sophisticated threats that we talked about, or you have a higher level of robustness necessary, then this would help you do the TRA simultaneously through the SANA process without adding a significant level of effort to it. So you're not having a full SANA process and a full TRA process as two separate activities or engagements. You've simply added a small amount of time to the SANA process to develop that TRA. So what do we do to enhance our SANA? As I mentioned, the assets in the TRA are much better than laid out in the BNS in SANA. So this is where we want to pirate some of that TRA component. So if you are looking at needing to enhance it or to do the TRA simultaneously, you should pull in the asset listing style of listing your assets and assessing them out of the TRA. This gives you a much stronger understanding of your business and a more precise risk assessment at the end. But it also, if you are having to do a TRA simultaneously, you've now completed the first part of your TRA without adding a huge level of effort. The second thing you want to do is look at your threats. This isn't relevant if you're just trying to beef up your SANA, but it is if you're trying to do both documents at the same time. They're not scored the same way between the two assessments. So if you do the threat assessment within your SANA, you need to look at the metrics over in your TRA and pull it over and score those threats so that the two become compatible, so that you've now completed the second stage of your TRA. And finally, it's, again, if you're trying to enhance your SANA process, you don't need step 3 here, but if you are trying to do both at the same time, you do want to consider the vulnerability assessment. It's much stronger through the SRTM than it is through the vulnerability assessment in the TRA. But if you're trying to do both at the same time, you need to pull those ratings from the TRA and drop them on top of your gaps that you've determined through your SRTM. So this is a very easy step for your practitioner to do. But if it's not done at the same time, you're going to have to do it again later, which is just adding a lot more level of effort to what you're trying to accomplish. When we're talking about this, what you see happening here is we're pulling from the assets and threats over to SANA, or we're pulling from SANA over to the vulnerability section of the TRA. So we've been talking about enhancing your TRA or enhancing your SANA, but what it comes down to is this: we're trying to integrate these two processes because they're not mutually exclusive. There are just reasons that one is stronger than the other, or a reason you want to do one in some situations and not the other. So we end up with this merged BNS and asset section, a combined threat section. The SCP SRTM really doesn't need a lot of combining. It's already ahead of the game. And then at the end of the day, you've got a more precise assessment report, or you've got your TRA already completed alongside it if you needed to address those higher level risks. In summary, what we want to try and do is integrate the two processes, threat and risk assessments and security assessment and authorization, into one holistic approach to risk management, keeping in mind that we do want to ensure that we don't simply do security for security's sake. We're doing the security that we need to enhance our process.
Got a query but short on time? Email your question to info@trm.ca. Just send us your message along with details of your preferred means of contact, and we'll be in touch as soon as possible. You'll find the address at our website, trm.ca.